thank the police for coming to the rescue at the end. And I'd like to thank you, more importantly, for coming and in fact braving the elements, whether they be elements of weather or the left wing. We're very pleased to have Nigel here today, who was coming today to do an event in the evening at a local school. But now there's a big question mark over that. I'm sure he'll suggest in a minute what his thoughts are on that. But I feel that the kind of activity that's occurred here today, there's two extremes. You see the extreme of how we, as UKIP members, gel together for the benefit of our party and eventually our country. And the other extreme was what you saw outside, and I'm not happy about that at all. This is for members and supporters only, in fact members and partners only. We didn't even go to support. And what I'm most pleased about today is that every single person that's here is a volunteer, is a member, and we did not make more than 2 phone calls relating to your tickets being sold here today. You came across in a tidal wave and wanted to be with Nigel, and I don't blame you for that. So let's give him a warm, welcoming, welcome, as we say, here he is!
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, Nigel.
The first speech I gave in Thanet was in 1999, in the run-up to the European election campaign of that year. And it's a measure of how far this party has come. But today, there were more protesters outside the meeting than we had in the meeting in 1999. So we have come a remarkable distance. And I have to say, I think that what you've seen outside today, and some of the press, over a chap called David Sylvester, a town councillor, so you know, parish council level, in the little town of Henley, who made some comments that, you know, are fairly balmy, let's be honest. Although the Prime Minister was fairly balmy too, wasn't he? Because he said the floods have been caused by global warming. So, you know, you pay your money and takes your choice. But the fact that that comment by him was identical to the comment that he made when he was a Conservative 18 months ago, which got no coverage, shows you that actually we got the establishment in this country a little bit rattled, and they're jolly well going to fight back. And we, in a way, have to welcome that, because what it shows is our message is getting through. And I must say, what happened on May the 2nd last year in the English County Council elections was astonishing. I was optimistic, I was bullish, I always am. But I thought we could do really well. But when I saw the results starting to come through during the night and through into the morning, you know, I simply couldn't believe that we picked up nearly a quarter of the vote across the country. I was astonished. And I saw bits of East Kent going purple. The whole of Folkestone. How did that happen? I've no idea. Sittingbourne and Sheffield. But here in Thanet, we had reason to be optimistic. Because we've had a good, active branch for many years, and that branch keeps working the ground. You know, there is absolutely no substitute in politics for continually being out there campaigning, rather than just turning up when the election comes along. So I know we were optimistic about Thanet, but to win 7 out of 8, all I can say, folks, is what went wrong with the 8? Now, these clusters of support, here in Folkestone, Sittingbourne and Sheppey, and further up the coast, places like Great Yarmouth, parts of Cambridgeshire, these areas in which we've done phenomenally well, and has of course led to a massive speculation about how we're going to do in the next general election, and who the candidates are going to be for the key target seats. And I think that some of the press have come along here today, possibly under a false apprehension that I'm about to make some statement, all right. This actually, although it's Thanet and you're special, but this is a routine visit for me. You know, I've been in London this morning, Thanet this evening, I'm going to be in Cheshire on Wednesday night, Lancashire on Thursday lunchtime. I've got 3 public meetings up and down the HS2 route in Buckinghamshire on Saturday. So I didn't come along, folks, to make a special announcement. So if you come all this way expecting it, you'll be sorry. And the reason is this, that as leader of UKIP, my job is to make sure the party fights the next battle in front of it, rather than worrying about the one that comes afterwards. And the next battle ahead of us takes place on May the 22nd, and it's the European elections. And I honestly, genuinely and sincerely believe that we have got sufficient wind in our sails and sufficient public support for me to say to you that if we get this campaign right, and we all do our bit, I honestly, genuinely believe we can top the polls in a national election in this country and cause a bit of an earthquake in British politics. So that's my next target. Cameras, you see, it's possible. Mind you, it's early yet. And I believe that is possible. And these European elections are really going to matter. They're really going to matter for us, I guess because I've set the bar pretty high. They're really going to matter for Nick Clegg, because if you look at the opinion polls for the Lib Dems, they are on the line at which they win or lose seats in virtually all of the regions of the United Kingdom. So the Lib Dems face the prospect of going from 10 seats, perhaps down to 2 seats, perhaps down to no seats. So for Clegg, these are a vital set of elections. For Miliband, they're a big and important set of elections. You know, he's trying to sell himself as the man that can win a common majority next time. Well, our message to Labour is, just you wait till our big advertising campaign gets going, particularly in the big northern cities, because I think the one thing the media have missed is that UKIP's appeal is as strong with old Labour as it is with disaffected Thatcherite Tories. We've got a huge potential with the Labour vote, and I want us to force Miliband's hand and to make sure that by the time the autumn conference season comes along, that Miliband is promising a referendum on EU membership too. You know, we've got to make sure that this referendum actually happens. And for David Cameron, these elections are important because no Conservative Party has ever finished third in any national election. And my feeling is that their party now looks so desperately split, with 95 of their backbenchers effectively signing a letter that it might just as well have said, "We love UKIP," really, mightn't it? And I think that if they do come third in these elections and get hammered, then there is a very real possibility that over the course of this summer, 46 signatures may be gained, and there could be a leadership contest. So in the past, Euro elections haven't mattered very much, but this time they really will. And if we do come first, then I will say where I'm going to stand in the next general election, and it will undoubtedly be a seat in this part of the world. That's about as much as I'm going to say. But what we have to do across East Kent, across these really 5 constituencies, through this part of East Kent, what we as a party will have to do in 2015 is make sure we've got 5 damn good candidates and 5 big campaigns. That's the only way we're going to succeed. If we throw all our resources behind one candidate and one constituency, the others then will pile all their resources into that constituency. We've got to fight it on a broader front than that. And my ultimate hope, come the general election, is that we have a Tory party promising a referendum, we have a Labour party promising a referendum, we have a Liberal Democrat party who get pretty much washed away, and we get UKIP into the House of Commons, holding the balance of power, and I tell you what, there would be a referendum then, wouldn't there?
Nigel, we'll take some questions if you have any. So anyone want to pose a question? I'll stand back here so I can identify a questioner. So who's first with a question then? James.
What's all this grief about the hunting business? I mean, is there a UKIP stand on that?
Well, the grief is, I think, well, there are 2 issues with the animal rights lobby here today. The first is the export of live animals, which of course has been a very contentious issue in Ramsgate for some years. Okay, that's their first issue. I have tried in the past to explain to them that this issue is utterly linked with our membership of the European Union, because under EU rules we cannot stop the export of live animals for slaughter because we're all part of one big single European market, and that of course includes horses too, as we know from our burgers and all the rest of it. So that's first. The second issue is the hunting issue. No, the party as a whole doesn't take a stance on this, other than to say that if county by county people called referendums and sufficient people signed a petition and they wanted it to be reintroduced, they could do so. They're probably particularly angry with me because I was photographed at the West Kent Hunt Meet on Boxing Day. Something I've done since 1968, and it's a family day out. I've never hunted a fox myself, but I think people, personally, I take the view that the state interferes far too much in our lives, tells us what we can and can't do. You know, they're on the verge of banning Coca-Cola now. I mean, goodness knows. And I think I take the view that we're big enough and ugly enough to make our own minds up on these things.
Mr. Kearney.
Yes, Nigel, assuming we leave the EU at some stage, we've got £53 million a day to do with something. Do you have any ideas what we could do with all that money?
Well, yeah, I've got some great ideas, actually. It'd be a hell of a party, wouldn't it? No. I think the big, you know, the biggest elephant in the room at the moment in British politics, and, you know, actually the others are now all talking about Europe and immigration and benefits. Labour are going to get really tough on benefits. Wow. So you feel you keep shifting things everywhere. But the one issue that no one's talking about is they're talking about the fact there's a bit of an economic recovery. Well, yes, there is some good news in parts of British industry, but actually the recovery that we have got is London-based and is property-based and is generally not being felt by the mass millions of people in this country. But the one thing no one's talking about is this. This coalition government was formed to get rid of the deficit, remember? Yes. They haven't done it. We're still going to be borrowing £110 billion a year more this year than we're going to earn. And by the time this 5-year coalition has finished, I mean, just think of this figure. By the time this 5-year coalition has finished, our national debt would have increased by 40%. That's the national debt we've been accumulating since the Napoleonic Wars. So we are living still as a nation way beyond our means. And the trouble is, nobody in politics wants to have that frank and honest conversation with the British public because they're fearful that if you say to people, we've got to do and take some tough measures and do some difficult things, that people won't vote for it. But I came into politics not to tell people what they want to hear. I came into politics because I think it's about time we had the truth. And I think unless we get a grip on our annual deficit and our ballooning national debt, then actually what we're doing is we're stealing from our grandchildren, who we are going to leave a millstone that they're going to find very, very difficult to pay back. So my frank answer, I'd love to say 53 million quid a day, you know, let's all have free beer tickets and lots of fun. But the brutal truth is that will be part of actually readjusting, you know, government spending in this country. We've got to get the economy back into some kind of equilibrium. If we don't, then we really are headed for a very, very bad state. I'm sorry it's a depressing answer, but it's the truth.
Sir.
Nigel, regards to the National Health Service, it seems to be a general consensus these days that it's the International Health Service. What do you think we should do about this?
Well, I think, again, this is an issue on which UKIP is leading the charge. You know, I mean, we've had this situation with the health. I mean, I've been going on Question Time since 1999 and any questions on those programmes. And all debate on the NHS used to be shut down by someone on the panel saying all the nurses, all the doctors are absolutely wonderful, every one of them, and if it wasn't for foreign people, the whole thing would collapse. And that led to, in effect, the cessation of debate on the subject. You know, when we talked about it becoming an international health service, we've been accused of being mean-spirited and nasty, but now it is part of the debate. I simply think this. We've confused and muddled immigration, i.e. people coming to settle, with work, people coming to work. They become one and the same thing. You know, if I want to get a job if I want to get a job in America, I get a 2-year work permit. I go and work in America for 2 years. I have to have health insurance. or they won't let me through JFK passport, and at the end of the 2 years, if I haven't left, they'll deport me. It's quite simple, and I think, you know, we are not, as a party, wanting to close down the thought that talented people from all over the world should want to come and work in this country. It's rather a good idea, actually, that talented people should want to come and work in this country, but they've got to have health benefit, and they've got to have a time-dependent work permit that is not an easy back route into automatic immigration. And the real problem we've got, and there's no question, there are lots of very nice, good young people that have come from Poland and countries like that, and who can blame them for wanting to better themselves? If I was Polish, or Romanian, or Bulgarian, I'd be coming here. But the nonsense is this, that they come here, work for minimum wage, and qualify automatically for child benefit, regardless whether their children are in this country or not, tax credits, child tax credits, and you start to add it up and you realise that we're actually paying and free healthcare, free primary school education if they do come here, and you start to realise actually that we are not just allowing foreign workers to come here to do lowly paid jobs, but we're also giving them massive in-work benefits. And that strikes me as being completely and utterly mad.
When is the taxpayer going to stop paying for Formula One racetracks in India, rockets to the moon in Africa, under the heading of foreign aid?
Now, there's a former colleague of mine had something to say about this over the course of last summer, as you may remember. So I'm going to be careful not exactly what he said. Although Godfrey had a very good point, didn't he? I thought when he was on with Jim Knuckley on the Today programme, he said that we're even sending money to Argentina, who've just bought 40 Mirage jets. Isn't this rather close to treason? At that moment, Jim Knuckley really was choking on his breakfast. Yeah, I think again, this is another one of those big changes in British politics. You know, to criticise, or to be seen to criticise, the foreign aid budget was something 3, 4, 5 years ago that was absolutely impossible. And it's another one of those subjects on which UKIP have made the running, and now, not Mr Cameron, but now many others in politics and in the press are talking about it. And I would just say this to you. I think already this party has shifted the centre of gravity in British politics on a whole raft of issues. And I want to make sure that this is the party that actually changes the history of this nation, and that we get back control of that those that went before us fought and sacrificed so much to defend. And I am determined that we're going to do that. Do you know what? I think we are.
Sorry, thanks. Shonk for honk.
Honk for shonk.
Honk for shonk. For shonk.
Beep, beep.
Nigel, thanks for coming for a quiet afternoon tea. But what I would like, as a Thanet person, it's a fantastic place to live. But at the moment, we've got an overload of cannabis, drugs on the streets, deprivation in all parts of town. You know, all our councillors, I shouldn't blame anybody really, they seem to be walking around there blinkered, they're not seeing what's going on in Clifftonville, they're too busy in other areas. Policing, obviously we're all saying about policing, I can smell cannabis from one end of the to another. It's wrong, these young kids want something to do. Is that wrong to mention cannabis and young kids?
What the question is, please?
What can we do about all this deprivation in Thanet? Because at the moment nothing's being done.
Well, I mean, there is a short-term answer, which runs along these lines, Trevor. I mean, you know, it was Blair who was the first Prime Minister to say that all the British youth were lazy, protectionist and useless, and that's why we had to have an open door to the whole of Poland. And now even Boris, who I quite like in some ways, says that all British youth are useless, therefore employers need foreign labour. I'll tell you something, last year I did that tour, you know, from the West Country up to Hadrian's Wall, across the top and back down again, a fortnight on the road, and I went round markets and pubs and all round the country, just sort of at random almost, meeting groups of ordinary people. And I'll tell you something, there's a significant number of our young people who aren't lazy, who aren't useless, but actually now find themselves discriminated against in terms of getting jobs in their own country. We do not need an oversupply of unskilled foreign labour. There are plenty of young British kids that would, at the right price, take those jobs. All right? And I really believe that very, very strongly. There are some, and perhaps this recent TV hit Benefit Street, shows you the scale of the problem. There are some people for whom the welfare state, sadly, has proved not to be a safety net for those in trouble, but actually has proved to be a glass ceiling on aspirations. And there are some pockets of our towns and cities where we're now in the third generation of people who have never, ever worked. And yes, you mentioned the drugs problem, and you could have said petty crime, and several other things. And we have to be honest, we are not going to turn that round overnight. Because even if we stop their benefits, for some, the actual culture of work isn't or discipline of any kind is not something they've been brought up with. Trevor, it's a problem. It's a problem, but that's not to say that we shouldn't try, and that's not to say that we don't need, actually through our schools, people being encouraged in terms of trying to give them some sort of ambition and sense of well-being. Because I think there are some areas in which kids leave with no ambition at all. And of course, absolutely at the heart of all of this is the problem of family breakdown. And again, reversing that culture is not something a government is going to do, even with a change in the taxation system. These have now become endemic problems with a section of our society. But what we must think about are those youngsters who are good kids, who just want a chance in life, and at the moment are not being given it, and they're resentful, they're angry, and lots of groups of young males having too much time on their hands can never be a good thing.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. I will come and mingle. I'm going to go and do 1 or 2 television interviews and see if the protesters are still here. But I will catch up with all of you over the course of the next half an hour. Thank you very much indeed.